Welcome along to the latest in our series of Data Insight Action. Data Insight Action is where we take a piece of data that we generated within the industry, and we really, most importantly, want to understand what can we do with this information? How do we take that forward and turn it from actionable insight into actual action? So today we're going to be discussing Net Promoter Score. I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Bedford, the Retention Guru. Good morning, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Jolly good. Next up, we have Zoe Cooper, Commercial Director of the STA. Morning, Zoe. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, really great, thanks.
Awesome. And last but by no means least, we've got Mike Hill, Director of Active Insight. Morning, Mike. How are you?
Yep, all good, thanks. All good.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, with that in mind then, Mike, would you like to set the scene and talk us through where we are with NPS and moving communities, please?
Yeah, sure. Just so everyone knows, once a year we do something called the Moving Communities Customer Experience Survey. It's part of the Sport England contract that we need to deliver it. And the first one we did was 3 years ago, which was the first year back really proper after COVID. So that was 2021. We did one in 22, and we're in the middle of doing the current one. It runs from about mid-June to mid-October. It's available free of charge for all English-based operators and local authorities to do. It is only available to the public sector, so the figures we're going to be talking about in a second only relate to public sector, leisure centres, sports centres, health and fitness, etc. We ask loads of questions, but obviously one of the key ones we ask is NPS. Sample size, it's the biggest survey of its kind. The one we did in 22, we got to over 60,000. The one in last year, we got over 40,000. And we're in the middle, the interim stage of this one, and we're standing at about 15, just below 15,000. So we hope to, by the end of October, get that up to 30,000. So it's big, chunky sample. It is an online survey. It is self-completion and self-selection. So there are biases there. But what I guess I'm interested in is two things. I'm going to share with you the scores from those 3 years, and then more importantly, let's focus on that direction of travel. So the first year back from COVID, the national English score for Moving Communities NPS stood at 32. And we thought, well, that's not too bad. I mean, going through COVID and people coming back, etc., it's lower than I typically expect, but not that much lower. But then when we did it in 22, exactly the same survey, same methodology, now, as I say, over 40,000 sample, it went down to 24. And I was looking last week at the interim results for this year's, and the NPS is currently standing at 18. And one of the reasons why, well, the main reason why it's gone down is an significant increase in the number of people who are classifying themselves as detractors, i.e. they're scoring 0 to 6 on that 0 to 10 scale. How likely would you be to recommend? So potentially, I mean, that may come up by mid-October when we've got the full sample, but usually halfway through with numbers of this kind, it's not going to shift radically. So I guess I'm just really interested to hear from Zoe and Paul. Is their experience out in the sector that over the last few years, the customer experience that certain public sector people are experiencing is going down? And if so, what may be the possible reasons for that? Obviously, Paul and Zoe both work with the private sector as well, so perhaps we can also tweak out some of those nuances between the public and private sector experiences.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Paul, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think there's a few things there, and I think it's well known that I'm a skeptic of our industry. I'm not just pure rah-rah. I'm always questioning because I want things to be better. I think sometimes what we're seeing, particularly in the public sector, is lower NPS because we've got lots of issues in terms of staffing and then providing the actual service that's published. I was with an operator yesterday and we were having conversations about the fact that they're having to cancel classes or they're having to cancel activities. And as a result of literally not having the staff to put those sessions on. And some of those issues include deciding whether you always cancel the same thing or you cancel different things so it affects different people. So you upset a lot of people a little bit or a small amount of people a lot. And if you then surveying people close to the time you've upset them, you're going to get obviously that lower score. But I do think in the public sector, with the operators that I work with, we've seen a lot of issues with actually delivering the service since we've come out of COVID to the level that people were expecting or have been promised.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I echo that with, again, being out with operators this week. It's a real challenge recruiting, retaining staff members, and obviously it has an impact on experience.
Yeah.
So, Zoe, what are your thoughts?
Well, we're in a situation where we've just undertaken our MPS, and our score is actually a whopping 84, which is just phenomenal. And that's actually surprised us, because since the last time we did our MPS in 2020, we've increased our membership by a quarter. And we've significantly increased the number of qualifications we deliver. So we're actually delivering, according to Ofqual statistics, up to 50% of the level 2 swimming teaching market in England. So it did come a bit of a surprise, to be honest. And I was recently reading an article by Qualtrics to say, and it was showing that 20% across all industries are dropping by MPS due to the kind of people want higher expectations post-COVID. So they really want a higher level of service. But we have invested a hell of a lot since the pandemic on our digital resources and digitalising a lot of our products and services, automating them. And I think that's gone a long way, listening to what the customers want to getting that 84% score.
Yeah. And what would you say in terms of, obviously, you know, you guys have been working incredibly hard. The impact that you then have on operators and therefore the member customer experience. How do you see that?
But I think
it's absolutely key to us. I mean, we are constantly striving to improve our services. You know, we're not just satisfied at 84%, we want to increase that. And that's what I love about the MPS, is that you can attribute the comments from your participants to departmental areas. So we've been able to really drill down the insight into the customer journey. So focusing more on our resources, how to improve, and also reward the departments that are performing exceptionally. So 87% scored us a 9 and a 10. We could go through those comments and use it as a morale booster for our employees, which is phenomenal. You know, it's just also allowed us to further our customer relationships. So we chose to leave the functionality on that we could contact the participants if they wish to be contacted, which we did. And actually, we had a few passers and detractors that I had honest and open, frank discussions with about their feedback, took it on board and changed that score around. So it was quite challenging, but also quite fun. So it's that engagement, isn't it? So it's hugely benefited us internally. And of course, it's kudos as well. You know, MPS is trusted. It's well recognised by the B2C and B2B market. So we've been able to showcase that we're well above the industry average. And that's helped us with applying for grants, applying for award applications. There's those huge benefits externally as well as internally to the organisation. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. And Paul, sorry, you were going to add to that as well.
Yeah, but I've lost my train of thought. I was so busy listening to Zoe.
We'll come back. I'm sure it'll come back, Paul. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think I'm just really interested because I think Zoe's MPS is based on, it's not based on end users, is it? It's based on your clients, as in the operators.
We did B2B and B2C, so predominantly B2B, and that's the one thing I wish I could segregate down, drill down further, the percentage. But we used our B2B to share with their consumers as well. So
I think it'd be really interesting to compare the two because it's you're in direct control of the relationship with your clients, and then they're in control more so of the relationship with the end user. So, and sometimes it's if you're a good brand, a good supplier, a provider of services, then it's easier, dare I say it, to manage and drive up your MPS than when you're dealing with, you know, the vast general public. I think the only thing I think it's really interesting what Paul said about, I think the expectations after COVID changing, because one of the things we noticed post COVID was who came back first. Well, it was the more dedicated clients, and also it tended to be the younger ones and more men than women came back. And we found the research that we did during COVID, that was partly because I'm generalizing here, women and older people were more concerned about coming back They wanted to have COVID-friendly protocols in place, so I'm just wondering if that is absolutely the case. Actually, that the expectations have changed. Certainly, expectations about cleanliness have gone up even more. So and that was always, one of the drivers of detraction. Unfortunately, a basic hygiene factor, excuse the pun, was cleanliness, and that's become even more of an issue. Have we addressed that as a sector? Probably not. We did do it during COVID to a certain extent, but that wasn't too bad because we only had a tenth or 25% of the clients coming in. So now we're back to normal. I think we've still got some key issues which are driving detraction. And the other thing which I hear a lot from focus groups, and I don't know why operators are doing this, is that some of the protocols that were put in place regarding bookings for swimming and Group X and to a certain extent the gym are still in place. Everyone went electronic, and they haven't gone back on that. And quite often I hear from people that were older or perhaps not so committed to using their place that they can't get in, they can't manage the booking system, or they're just not able to put in because the numbers are still limited.
So where I was yesterday, they have an overuse issue. And so the project we were actually working on is not a retention project. It's on actually getting, how do you accommodate what you're talking about? And they've only been open since COVID. So they weren't open pre, and they had to put a booking system on their gym from day one. Excuse me, I'm going to shut the door. The dogs have just decided something. I apologise.
Brilliant.
Contributing towards the conversation.
They are.
I am so sorry. I thought they were just going to sit quietly, but there's obviously a delivery of something, and they've decided they need to attack the postman. Because they couldn't deliver the level of service they wanted to deliver if they had open access. And the feedback, I don't know about, we didn't get into the conversation on age, but we were certainly looking at, in terms of swim lanes, people liking the fact that they could book their swim lanes and say, I'm coming in at this time. I know there's going to be this number of people in the pool. And so I think if you don't like it, you really don't like it. And if you do, you really do. Where this operator was able to, I think they've had it from the beginning. So it's not like you have a choice. And I know I spoke to a big multi-site operator just post-pandemic who were saying, well, Paul, should we go back to, we like the booking system thing because people are actually turning up when they say they're going to turn up. They leave when they say they're going to leave. We know how many people are in the gym. We've got period of time to clean. We can staff it with a lower number of staff because we actually know the actual number of people that are coming in. But once they're in, they all tend to turn up on the hour. So we can get them in and then we can actually interact with them while they're here and then clean before the next. But I think it's a dilemma. I just think it's a dilemma. And if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you don't. And I don't think there's a way around it. I think you just have to decide what you're going to do. But if it's brought about, if it's something that's been implemented more recently, I think you're going to get lower scores. But I think the other thing we always need to be mindful of is trying to compare year on year. If the people completing the surveys are different, if the sample group is different, so the clubs might be the same or the facilities might be the same, but if the actual people who we're sampling each year is different, they might have thought the same for the last 3 years, but have finally decided to report on it, where the ones who reported high last time haven't reported this time. So we can get some fluctuations if it's different sample groups.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Mike, in terms of the sample group?
Yeah, no, Paul's absolutely right. I mean, the ideal would be that we track the same individuals over 3 years and look at it on an individual basis. And it's impossible to do that using the methodology that we do. It would be really interesting, if people listening to this, and there's some companies out there that provide that service as we do, Jules, but it'd be really interesting to look at whether, and I suspect that it's probably not gone down by the amount that we have, As you know, as everyone knows, the people that complete surveys tend to be people that are at the extremes. They're either people that are, very positive or very negative, because if you sit in the middle and you're ambivalent, you're less likely. So an NPS also is a score which is quite dramatic. It can swing because it's a combination looking at the two ends. It sort of ignores the chunk of people in the middle. So we've got to take all of that into account, and it may be, and I'd be really surprised, if it is an absolute true reflection that it's gone down, because in fact it's gone down by 50% in 3 years, which seems very dramatic. And anecdotally, I don't think any of us believe things are that bad, but I think it just stimulates the conversation and says, well, we had a little bit of a bounce coming. Everyone was really happy and positive, post COVID, and now we've moved into other problems caused by energy crisis, cost of living, staffing, resources. So I guess the next question is, well, Jules, what should the focus be to try and address this?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm speaking broadly here, but I mean, in my experience with the operators I've been working with, I'm certainly seeing a shift now in terms of, everyone was very operationally focused coming out of COVID, understandably, rightfully so. And as you've just said, Mike, there's lots of challenges at the moment, particularly around recruiting and retaining, staff members. But I'm starting to see a real shift towards, actually, we really need to create an experience that is memorable, that people want to come back. It drives that behavioural change. Paul, have you seen a shift on that dial at all in recent times?
I've seen the desire to shift, but limited by the resource.
Yeah.
It's like everybody I'm talking to is going, we need to do something better. We need to up our game. We need to deliver on what we say we're going to do, but they are constrained. But there is a huge desire. But I think there's a desire, but there's often not a direction. So it's almost like we want to be better, but we don't know what to do, because they've been so operationally focused for so long. Probably the past 5 years pre-COVID, come through COVID to now, that it's almost that mindset of we're operationally spot on. And you go, how would you improve the customer experience? And they're like, they don't know.
No. And again, just on that, and I know I said we have to be quite concise, but obviously I love talking about this, but it's really interesting, isn't it? Because actually, I think it can be quite overwhelming in terms of customer experience. Well, I've got to come up with this massive strategy, when actually it's the detail, it's the height, it's the warm welcome. We've seen through moving communities that 76% of inactive people are more likely to go to a leisure centre and start their physical activity inside. So again, to have our teams know that they can have such an impact at just a warm welcome and deliver that consistently, it doesn't need any additional budget. It just needs that mindset shift of putting that customer at the heart of everything in that moment. So on that point, and again, I'm chairing, I shouldn't be talking too much. How can we support our operators? What's your key takeaway from today's discussion?
For me, it would be that get the basics right. We've got the basics right operationally, get the basics right at a service level. As you just mentioned, warm welcomes, fond farewells, acknowledgement that people have come in. We don't need to get into massive interactions with people, but I think we need to give them, we need to recognise that they've made the effort to come in, and we need to validate that by just acknowledging that they're here today, rather than walking past them or keeping our head down. I think absolutely right now, before you try to do anything clever, just get the basics right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Paul. Zoe?
For me, we've seen a massive shift in personalisation post-pandemic. So really making the experience personable, and also a speedy shift towards digitalised transformation in essence. So really thinking is the smart ways of working, but fundamentally listening to your customers and providing them what they want.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Zoe. Mike?
Yeah, I guess for me, it would be, recruitment. We know it's really challenging to get the right people. We know there's turnover and there's issues of remuneration, etc. And I think this has been happening to a certain extent, but I think it needs to happen more. We need to move away from recruiting people on straight technical qualification type stuff and look at the people and the personality and their communication style and skill, because the other stuff can be taught, reasonably easy, but it takes an awful lot of training, coaching and mentoring. to change someone who, you know, isn't very communicative, can't relate and empathize with other people into someone that can. And when those interactions, now the simple interactions that Paul was talking about, the basic, you know, welcomes and farewells, hopefully we can get everyone to do that. But the more meaningful ones, which need to happen in the gym and other places, Group X, we just need to make sure that we get the right people in place and focus on more on the soft skills rather than the hard. For most people, for most people, the vast majority of people that come to the gym, they just need to start moving more.
Yeah.
You know, they don't need a lot of technical stuff using balls and barbells and gyms and kits. Let's just, you know, most of them will benefit and feel better and happier and more motivated if we can just get them start moving simply.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks so much. Well, thank you all for joining me today. It's been a great discussion, really great insight. And let's see what the score is come October. Let's see if we shift that at all. So thanks ever so much, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.